Ma'am, is this yours? I think you threw it away by mistake.
Raymond Mitchell stands at an iron gate in duct-taped boots, holding a leather trunk that weighs more than he does. Inside that trunk, $80,000 in cash. Behind the gate, Caroline Whitfield. Pearls, cashmere, a glass of wine at 11 in the morning, stares at him like he's a ghost.
Where did you get that?
Junkyard, ma'am. I was sorting scrap. Your name's on the plate.
She covers her mouth. He shifts his weight. He hasn't eaten in 3 days. He could have kept every dollar. Nobody saw him find it. Nobody was coming to look. He brought it back anyway. What he didn't know was that simple choice had just unlocked a secret worth far more than money. 18 hours earlier, the sun hadn't cleared the rooftops when Raymond Mitchell folded his blanket into a tight military square. 18 months on the street hadn't taken that habit from him. The Army Corps of Engineers had built it into his hands a long time ago, and some things, once built, don't come undone. He fed Buddy first. Half a can of generic dog food scraped clean against the side. Slow, boy. I know. The dog ate slowly, the way he'd been taught. In the next tent, Tyler Brooks stirred and rubbed his eyes. Uncle Ray, it's still dark out. Go back to sleep, son. You eating today? Linda's bringing coffee. Don't worry about me. Raymond draped his spare blanket over the boy's shoulders and slipped out into the cold. Davis Salvage Yard sat at the end of a gravel road that nobody plowed in winter. Linda Davis stood at the gate in grease-stained jeans, gray hair pulled back, a thermos in one hand and a wrapped sandwich in the other. Estate clean-out came in last night, she said, holding them out. Briarcliff Heights. Real old money. You get first pick before the resellers show up. I'll work it off, ma'am. Raymond. She fixed him with a look. You don't owe me for a sandwich. Yes, ma'am. I do. She shook her head and walked back toward the office. Stubborn old man. Yes, ma'am. That was the kindness between them. She fed him, and she let him keep his dignity. He worked the hall methodically. A broken Victrola with the horn dented in, picture frames with cracked glass and forgotten faces behind them, a box of monogrammed silver someone hadn't bothered to count, a child's rocking horse. And then, near the bottom of the pile, he saw it. Brown leather, scuffed at the corners, brass fittings tarnished a soft green, a plate on the lid engraved in elegant script, Property of Eleanor R. Whitfield. Raymond set down his crowbar. He ran his thumb across the engraving slowly, the way a man reads something in Braille. He picked the trunk up, set it down again. The weight was wrong. He'd hauled hundreds of trunks in his life. At the salvage yard, before that at construction sites, before that in basic training. And he knew what an empty trunk should weigh, what a trunk of linens should weigh, what a trunk of books should weigh. This was none of those. He looked at the lock. The brass tumbler was scratched bright in 2 places, fresh scratches, not old ones. Somebody opened you up, he murmured to the trunk, and then threw you out anyway. Now what would make a person do that? He carried it to Linda's office. This one's got a name on it, he said. Folks might come looking. Linda glanced up from her ledger and read the plate over the rim of her glasses. Estate said clear it all. Family didn't want a thing. Then why's the lock fresh scratched? She frowned. That's so. That's so. She thought about it. Tell you what, set it aside. Take it home tonight. If nobody calls in 2 weeks, it's yours to sell. Yes, ma'am. And Raymond, if you do open it and there's something funny in there, you bring it straight to me. Yes, ma'am. He hauled it back to the encampment in a borrowed wheelbarrow that squeaked at every turn. That afternoon, Raymond sat at the periodicals desk of Atlanta Central Library in clean clothes. He kept one set folded in a plastic bag for library days. Around him, students typed on laptops they could afford. He read the Wall Street Journal with the focus of a man planning something. A folded sheet of paper sat beside the newspaper. A teenager at the next computer leaned over. "Sir, you need help with the screen?" "No, son, thank you. I was reading the paper." "Oh." The boy looked at the folded list, the careful handwriting. "You drawing up a budget?" Raymond smiled, just barely. "Something like that." At the bottom of the page, a single number was circled twice. $840. It was how much he needed to climb out. He had saved $312. He was getting there. Slowly. He walked back to the encampment as the streetlights flickered on, the trunk waiting under a tarp, the brass plate catching one last sliver of dusk. The encampment was quiet by the time Raymond got back. A few small fires flickered in metal drums. Somebody was singing softly 2 tents down, an old gospel song his mother used to hum over the kitchen sink in Macon, 40 years ago. He let the song carry him the last 20 steps. Tyler was awake, sitting cross-legged outside the tent with a library book in his lap and Buddy curled against his thigh. "You're late, Uncle Ray." "Library closes when it closes." "What'd you read?" "Newspapers. You always read newspapers. Anything good?" Raymond paused, then set the wheelbarrow down carefully. "Read about a family. Lady named Whitfield. Got the same sickness Diane's mama had at the end." Tyler looked up. "Alzheimer's?" "Mm-hmm." Tyler closed the book. "You okay?" "I'm always okay, son." That was a lie, but it was the kind of lie a man tells a boy to keep the boy walking forward. Inside the tent, Raymond lit a battery lantern and set it on a crate. He pulled out a small folded photograph from his shirt pocket. Diane on their porch in Macon, the summer before the diagnosis. She was laughing at something just out of frame. He looked at her for a long moment, the way he did most nights, and then tucked her back over his heart. Beside the photo, 3 other things lived in that pocket. His Army Corps discharge papers, soft with folding. An old business card that read, "Mitchell Construction, Foreman, 15 years. And a laminated photograph of a small white house with a green door. The one the bank took in 2019, 3 months after Diane's funeral, when the medical bills came due all at once and his employer downsized the same week. He had not been a homeless man for most of his life. He had been a husband, a foreman, a homeowner, a deacon at Mount Olive Baptist. Then, in the space of 120 days, he had been none of those things. He pulled the trunk into the tent. The latches were old but solid. He worked them with his utility knife, careful not to scratch the brass any worse than someone already had. The lid creaked open. On top, a moth-eaten quilt, hand-stitched, the kind a grandmother makes for a grandchild. Underneath the quilt, a layer of yellowed tissue paper. Underneath the tissue, a false bottom panel, lifted easily on a finger groove someone had clearly used before. Raymond stopped breathing. Bricks of $100 bills, banded, crisp, stacked in neat rows like books on a shelf. Beside the cash, a tarnished gold wedding ring. A black and white photograph of a young man in a Navy uniform. Edward, 1962, written on the back in fountain pen. And a letter, sealed in a cream envelope, the ink on the front faded but legible. "My darling, to be opened when you've made up your mind." Buddy whined low at the tent flap. "I know," Raymond whispered. "I know." He counted the cash because that's what a foreman does. He counted it twice. $80,000. Exactly. Banded in 8 stacks of 10. He sat back on his heels. For a long time he didn't move. His mind ran every number he knew. The 840 he needed to climb out. The 312 he had. The $79,160 by which this single trunk exceeded his entire life. He thought about new boots, a motel for Tyler, a A storage unit, a bus ticket to anywhere, a real grave marker for Diane, who was buried under a county stone because he couldn't afford the granite she deserved. He thought about all of it. And then he closed the false bottom. He closed the trunk. He locked the latches. He set the trunk in the corner of the tent and laid the quilt back over the top, the way you'd cover something sleeping. "That's somebody's whole life in there, buddy," he said softly. "Somebody's whole life." He blew out the lantern. Outside the tent, the gospel song 2 doors down had ended. The encampment slept, and Raymond Mitchell lay awake on a thin foam mat, $80,000 2 feet from his head, thinking about Diane, and about a woman named Eleanor he had never met, and about how some things, even when nobody is watching, you just don't do. The morning bus to Briarcliff Heights was nearly empty. Raymond sat by the window with the trunk between his knees, secured with a borrowed luggage strap. He wore his cleanest shirt, gray, ironed flat on a piece of cardboard the night before, and the same duct-taped boots, because new ones were on a list he hadn't reached yet. Buddy was back at the encampment with Tyler. He had told the boy only that he had an errand. The bus climbed north. Strip malls gave way to oak-lined streets. Houses got farther apart and taller. A woman across the aisle clutched her purse a little tighter when Raymond shifted his weight. He pretended not to notice. He had been pretending not to notice for 18 months. At the stop on Magnolia Lane, he stepped off into a different country. The sidewalks here were swept. The mailboxes were stone. A landscaper running a leaf blower 3 driveways down stopped working and watched him walk past with the trunk. Number 28 sat behind a wrought iron gate flanked by 2 stone lions. The house beyond looked like a museum that someone had accidentally moved into. Raymond pressed the intercom. A camera the size of a thimble rotated toward him. A wary voice came through the speaker. "Yes? Can I help you?" "Ma'am, my name is Raymond Mitchell. I have something that belongs to Eleanor Whitfield. I came to bring it home." A long pause. "Wait there." Footsteps on stone. The gate buzzed and clicked. A side door of the main house opened, and a woman in her late 30s stepped out, pearls at her throat, cashmere cardigan she'd clearly slept in, a glass of white wine in her hand even though it wasn't yet 11 in the morning. Caroline Whitfield. Her eyes were red-rimmed. She came down the walk slowly, the way a person approaches a thing they think might disappear. She stopped 6 feet from him and looked at the trunk. Her hand went to her mouth. "Oh my God." "Yes, ma'am." "Oh my God. Oh my God." She started to cry, quietly, like she was trying not to. Raymond stood very still, holding the trunk between them, because he didn't know what else to do. "Where did you find it?" "Junkyard, ma'am. Davis Salvage on Pine. Came in with an estate clean-out yesterday." Yes. We had the attic cleared out last week." Her voice was breaking. "I'm so sorry. Please, come inside, please." He hesitated. "Ma'am, I don't want to track. Please." She turned and walked back toward the house, and he followed because saying no would have hurt her worse than saying yes. The foyer was larger than his entire shelter intake floor. A grand piano nobody played. Oil portraits of men in stiff collars. A nurse moved silently past with a medication tray and did not look up. Through an arched doorway, Raymond glimpsed an elderly woman in a wheelchair, staring at a window. White hair like spun glass. Hands folded in her lap the way a child folds them in church. Eleanor. Caroline set her wine glass down on a marble side table with a small, embarrassed clink, as if she had just realized she was carrying it. "Please," she said again, gesturing toward a sitting room. "Sit. I have to call my brother. I have to call him right now." Raymond set the trunk gently on the rug, took off his cap, and sat on the edge of an armchair that cost more than his last apartment. Caroline stepped into the next room with her phone pressed to her ear. Raymond heard her voice break twice before the door closed. He sat very still in the armchair, hat in his lap, the trunk on the rug at his feet like a sleeping dog. A housekeeper in a black uniform appeared with a glass of water on a silver tray. She would not meet his eyes. "Thank you, ma'am," he said. She nodded once and left. He didn't touch the water. When Caroline came back, her face was wet, but her hands were steadier. She sat across from him on a low couch and folded her hands in her lap the way her mother had folded hers in the wheelchair. "Mr. Mitchell, I owe you an explanation and an apology." "You don't owe me anything, ma'am." "I do. Please let me try." He nodded. "That trunk belonged to my mother, Eleanor. She was the most organized woman I have ever known. Every birthday card she ever received alphabetized. Every check stub since 1968 filed by year." Caroline laughed once, short and wet. "And then, about 4 years ago, she started forgetting where she kept the spoons." "Yes, ma'am, I know how that goes." She looked at him. "My wife's mother," he said quietly. "Same thing. Toward the end, she didn't know my wife's name, but she knew mine. Nobody could ever explain why." Caroline's eyes filled again. She blinked them clear. "Last Tuesday, I had a service come clear out the attic. I should have been up there with them. I wasn't. I was—" She gestured vaguely at the wine glass still sitting on the marble table. "Not myself. The housekeeper supervised. She told the crew anything that looked like the children's old toys could go. And my boys, when they used to visit before the divorce, they played pirates up there, treasure hunts. They left chests and boxes everywhere." Raymond closed his eyes for one breath. "The trunk was on a shelf in the back. The housekeeper assumed it was theirs. She had no way of knowing my mother had a false bottom built into it 60 years ago." 60 years? "My father, Edward, went into the Navy in 1962. They had been married 6 months. He told her if anything happened to him on deployment, she should have a fund of her own that no man could touch. He had it built for her before he shipped out. She put away cash from her own teaching salary every month for the rest of his life. He died in 2009. She kept adding to it. She told me last year, on a clear afternoon, that she wanted it used for a scholarship in his name." Caroline's hands were shaking. "And I threw it out, Mr. Mitchell. I threw out my father's last gift to my mother because I was too drunk on a Tuesday morning to walk up 2 flights of stairs." He let her cry. He did not reach for her. He did not tell her it was all right. He understood, the way only someone who had lost everything understands, that some grief is not for fixing. It is for sitting beside. After a long moment, she wiped her face with the heel of her hand and stood up. She crossed to a writing desk by the window, opened a drawer, and took out a leather checkbook. "How much was in it?" "I didn't take a penny, ma'am." "How much, Mr. Mitchell?" $80,000, banded in 8 stacks of 10, plus a ring, the photograph of your father, and a letter." She closed her eyes. "All of it? You brought all of it back?" "Yes, ma'am." She uncapped a pen. "I'm going to write you a check for $10,000. "No, ma'am." "5 then, please. Mr. Mitchell, please." "No, ma'am." 1,000, just please. Let me give you something." He stood up slowly and set his hat on his knee. "Mrs. Whitfield, I appreciate the offer, I do. But I didn't bring this trunk back here to be paid. I brought it back here because somebody loved somebody enough to hide it for 60 years. And that somebody is sitting in a wheelchair in the next room, and she deserves to die knowing it came home. If I take your money, then what I did this morning becomes a transaction. And it wasn't a transaction. It was the right thing. That's all." He had not made a speech that long in 2 years. His voice held to the last word. Caroline stared at him. She set the pen down on the checkbook. She did not pick it back up. "Mr. Mitchell." "Yes, ma'am." Would you sit with my mother for a moment? Just a moment. She doesn't recognize anyone most days, but sometimes she comes back. And if she comes back today, I would like her to see the face of the man who brought him home." He swallowed. "Yes, ma'am. I would be honored." The nurse stepped out of the parlor as they approached, gave Caroline a small nod, and disappeared down the hall. Eleanor Whitfield sat by the window in a shaft of late morning light. Her hair was the color of unspun cotton. Her hands lay folded in her lap. Raymond knelt slowly beside the wheelchair, the way he used to kneel beside Diane in the hospital bed at the end. He didn't say anything. He just waited. Eleanor's eyes drifted across his face, drifted past him, drifted back. And then, for 10 clear seconds, she was there. Her hand rose trembling and settled against his cheek. "You brought him home," she whispered. "Didn't you?" Raymond's eyes filled. "Yes, ma'am, I did." "Edward." "He's home, ma'am. He's all the way home now." She smiled. A small, complete smile, the way a person smiles when a long worry has finally lifted. Her hand stayed on his face for another 2 seconds, and then the light behind her eyes softened and dimmed, and she was gone again, looking out the window at a tree she would not remember tomorrow. Caroline, standing in the doorway, was holding both hands over her mouth. Raymond stayed kneeling for a moment longer. Then he stood, leaned down, and gently kissed the top of Eleanor's head, the way a son would. He did not know why he did it. He just did. Behind them, the front doorbell rang. The doorbell rang a second time before Caroline could compose herself. She wiped her face quickly and walked toward the foyer. Raymond followed at a respectful distance, his hat already back in his hand. A man stepped into the entryway as if he owned the deed to it. Charcoal 3-piece suit, silver cufflinks, a leather portfolio under one arm. He was somewhere in his 50s, with the kind of smile a politician practices in a mirror. "Caroline, sweetheart, I came as soon as I got your message. What on earth is happening?" "Gerald, this is Mr. Mitchell. He brought back Mother's trunk." Gerald Hawthorne's eyes went to the trunk on the rug. They lingered there for half a second longer than a polite man's eyes would. Then they swung up to Raymond, and the smile arrived, wide and warm and exactly wrong. "Mr. Mitchell, what a remarkable thing you've done." He extended a hand. "Gerald Hawthorne, I've handled the family's affairs for 22 years. Raymond shook his hand once. The grip was soft. The eyes were not. "Sir, and how exactly did you come to find Mrs. Whitfield's property?" "Davis, salvage yard. Estate clean-out came in yesterday." And did you open the trunk before bringing it here?" "I did, sir, to confirm whose it was." "I see. And was there anything else inside, besides the cash?" Raymond watched his face. "A ring, sir, a photograph, and a letter." Hawthorne's smile did not move, but something behind it shifted by a single degree. "How thorough of you." He turned to Caroline. "Darling, why don't I take a quick inventory, just for the insurance file? You've had an emotional morning." "Of course, Gerald." He knelt beside the trunk. He took out his phone. He photographed the brass plate twice, and the lock once, and Raymond's worn boots beside it once, quickly, as if by accident. Raymond noticed. He took his leave a few minutes later. Caroline pressed both his hands at the gate and made him promise to come back for dinner on Sunday. He promised because she needed him to. The bus ride home, he sat by the window and thought about Hawthorne's photograph of his boots and did not understand it yet. 3 days passed. Raymond went back to the salvage yard. He told Linda only that he had returned a trunk to a family in Briarcliff Heights. Linda watched his face for a long second and did not ask more. family take care of you? They tried. I didn't let them. Stubborn old man. Yes, ma'am. She slid a wrapped sandwich across the counter and walked away before he could refuse. That night, Tyler came back to the encampment grinning so wide his ears almost touched. Uncle Ray, the coffee shop on Ponce. They want a second interview Tuesday. That's good, son. They said my reference was solid. I gave them Miss Linda. She told them I was, and I quote, a steady young man. You are a steady young man. Uncle Ray, Tuesday. Raymond smiled, the way he smiled when something was finally going right for somebody who deserved it. He cooked beans on a camp stove and they ate by lantern light, and Buddy got the last of the cornbread because the dog had earned it. Tuesday did not come the way they thought it would. Monday night, just after 10, 2 unmarked sedans rolled up to the gravel lot at the edge of the encampment. 4 uniformed Atlanta police officers and 2 plainclothes detectives stepped out. The detectives carried a warrant. The officers carried flashlights. Raymond was reading a library copy of The Cain Mutiny by lantern. Tyler was asleep in the next tent. Buddy heard the boots first and started to growl low in his throat. Mr. Mitchell. He set the book down carefully and stepped out of the tent with his hands visible at his sides. He had served 3 deployments. He knew how to be still in front of armed men. Yes, sir. Raymond David Mitchell? Yes, sir. We have a warrant to search your belongings in connection with a reported theft of $25,000 from the estate of Eleanor Whitfield. The air left him. Sir, I returned that trunk 3 days ago. I gave the family every dollar that was in it. $80,000, banded, in 8 stacks of 10. The complaint specifies $25,000 reported missing in addition to the recovered amount. Sir, please step aside. Tyler had woken at the noise. He stood in his tent flap in a t-shirt and gym shorts, eyes wide, mouth slightly open. Uncle Ray? It's all right, son. Stay there. Don't move. They're just looking. They won't find anything because there isn't anything to find. You hear me? Yes, sir. You hear me, Tyler? Yes, sir. Raymond stepped aside. They went through his life on the gravel. They emptied his tent and laid every item out in a line under the floodlights as if it were evidence in a courtroom. His folded blankets, his 3 changes of clothes, his shaving kit, his Bible, his Army Corps discharge papers, soft with folding, the business card that said Mitchell Construction, foreman, 15 years. The laminated photograph of the small white house with the green door. The folded photograph of Diane on the porch in Macon. The detective lifted Diane's photo with 2 gloved fingers and turned it over to check the back. That was the moment Raymond looked away. Around the floodlit circle, the other tents had opened. People stood in their doorways and watched. A young mother held her hand over her son's eyes. An older man in a wheelchair, a veteran Raymond had served coffee to on cold mornings, took off his cap and held it against his chest the way a man does at a graveside. They found nothing. They put it all back wrong. The blankets unfolded, the Bible upside down, Diane's photograph face down on the dirt. The lead detective wrote something on a clipboard. Sir, you're free to remain on site. Do not leave the metro area without notifying this office. We may have follow-up questions. Yes, sir. They left. For a long moment, nobody in the encampment moved. Then a woman 2 tents over, Miss Yvonne, 60-something, missing 2 teeth, the warmest laugh in the lot, walked over without a word. She knelt down on the gravel and picked up Diane's photograph. She wiped the dust off the front with the corner of her apron. She handed it to Raymond. Don't you let them take her from you twice, Raymond Mitchell. He couldn't speak. He nodded. She squeezed his shoulder and walked back to her tent. Tyler was crying. Uncle Ray, why'd they do that? You didn't do nothing. I know, son. You gave it back. You gave all of it back. I know. Then why? Raymond knelt down so he was eye to eye with the boy. Tyler, listen to me. Sometimes a man does the right thing and the world makes him pay for it anyway. That doesn't mean it was the wrong thing. You understand me? No, sir. That's all right. You will. The next morning, the local news ran a 30-second segment. Homeless man under investigation in alleged theft from prominent Atlanta family. They used his name. They did not use a photograph because they did not have one. They did not need one. By noon, 3 different shelter directors had called Nancy Wilson, his caseworker, asking what was going on. By 1 o'clock, the manager of the coffee shop on Ponce called Tyler personally to rescind the second interview. Son, listen, you seem like a good kid, but our owner saw the news this morning, and the man you listed as your guardian, we just can't right now. I'm sorry. Tyler hung up the payphone outside the library and stood very still on the sidewalk for almost a full minute. He walked back to the encampment slowly. When he got there, Raymond was at Davis Salvage doing a half-day. Tyler sat down outside the tent with Buddy and put his face in the dog's fur. Across town, in a downtown office on the 22nd floor, Gerald Hawthorne sat behind a mahogany desk and poured a finger of bourbon into a crystal glass. A junior associate stood in the doorway. And if he doesn't plead, sir? Hawthorne sipped slowly. He's homeless. No lawyer will take it pro bono fast enough. He'll plead within a week. They always do. And the daughter? Caroline? Caroline drinks and grieves. She does not investigate. He turned his chair to look at the Atlanta skyline. He is nobody. Nobody will care. Caroline Whitfield saw the news segment by accident. She had been pouring her second glass of Chardonnay at 10:45 in the morning when the muted television above the kitchen island flashed a chyron she would never forget. Homeless man under investigation in alleged theft from prominent Atlanta family. She set the bottle down. She turned the volume up. She listened to the entire 30 seconds twice. Then she picked up the phone and called Gerald Hawthorne. Gerald, what is this on the news? Caroline, sweetheart, I was going to call you this afternoon. There were some irregularities in the inventory. I authorized a complaint to protect you and your mother. I should have looped you in. I'm sorry. What irregularities? $25,000, darling, from your mother's safe deposit reconciliation. The timing, you understand. It lines up, unfortunately, with Mr. Mitchell's visit. I'm sure it's nothing. The police will sort it out. Please don't trouble yourself. She was quiet for a long moment. Gerald. Yes, sweetheart. My mother has not had a safe deposit box in 9 years. We closed it the year of her diagnosis. The line was silent. Gerald. Caroline, sweetheart, please don't get worked up. You've been emotional. Let me handle this. That is what you pay me for. She hung up. She poured the Chardonnay down the sink. Caroline Whitfield had a key her brother James had given her 4 years ago. It was small and brass, and it opened the locked study at the back of the house, her mother's study, which had not been touched since Eleanor had stopped recognizing the door to it. Gerald Hawthorne did not know the key existed. She had never told him because she had never thought to. She opened the study at noon. 3 hours later, she was sitting on the floor in a circle of pulled ledgers and bank statements, her hair pinned up with a pencil, a calculator on her knee. The numbers swam. The numbers refused to swim. The numbers were exactly what they were. She called her brother on FaceTime. James, I need you to fly home tonight. Right now, I need you to bring whoever you brought to that Senate hearing on elder abuse last March. Senator James Whitfield was in his Washington office. He set down the legal pad he had been writing on. Caroline, talk slow. She talked slow. He listened for 11 minutes without interrupting. When she finished, he said only, I'm on the 7 o'clock. Then, more quietly, and Caroline, you did good today. She didn't answer. She just nodded at the screen and ended the call so he wouldn't see her cry. That same evening at the encampment, Caroline's Mercedes pulled up to the gravel lot. She stepped out in flats and jeans and a t-shirt, clothes Raymond had not known she owned. She carried a leather portfolio under one arm and a paper bag from a diner under the other. Tyler stood up from where he had been sitting with Buddy. "Ma'am? Are you Tyler?" "Yes, ma'am. I brought sandwiches. 3, and one for the dog with no onions." "Where is Mr. Mitchell?" "At the salvage yard. He should be back in an hour." "May I wait?" Tyler looked at her. He looked at the Mercedes. He looked at the paper bag. "Yes, ma'am." She sat on a milk crate outside the tent. She fed Buddy half a sandwich by hand. She asked Tyler about his interview at the coffee shop and listened to the whole story without interrupting once. When he finished, she said quietly, "That was not fair to you, Tyler. I am going to fix what I can fix. I promise you that." When Raymond came up the gravel road and saw the Mercedes, he stopped walking for a full 3 seconds. Caroline stood up. "Mr. Mitchell, I did not authorize that complaint. I came to tell you that to your face, and I came because I need your help." "My help, ma'am." She opened the portfolio. "My mother has been bled for 3 years. I cannot read these numbers. You ran construction budgets for 15 years. I think you can. Will you look?" He looked at her. He looked at Tyler. He looked at Buddy. He took the portfolio. "Yes, ma'am. I will look." Raymond worked the portfolio at the encampment that night by lantern light, the way he had once worked blueprints in a foreman's trailer in Macon a lifetime ago. Tyler held the flashlight steady on the page, kneeling beside him on the foam mat, careful not to let the beam shake. Caroline sat on a folding chair she had pulled from the trunk of her Mercedes, drinking diner coffee out of a paper cup with both hands wrapped around it for warmth. The wind moved through the tarps above them in a slow, even rhythm. It took Raymond 40 minutes. He turned the ledger sideways. He ran his thumb down a column of vendor codes. He stopped. He went back 2 pages. He stopped again. "Ma'am, look here." "What am I looking at, Mr. Mitchell?" "These 3 vendors, Beacon Consulting, Pinewood Advisory, Lakeshore Holdings. Different names, different invoice templates, different return addresses, same routing prefix on every single wire transfer." "Meaning?" "Meaning they're the same bank, ma'am, same account family, probably the same shell company under 3 different masks. Whoever set this up was sloppy on the back end because they didn't think anybody would ever look at the back end." Caroline's hands closed slowly into fists in her lap. "How much, Mr. Mitchell?" He worked it another 20 minutes with a stub pencil on the back of an envelope. 3 years, 39 months exactly, $636,000, give or take 1,000. She closed her eyes for a long moment. "Gerald?" "Yes, ma'am." She stood up and walked 20 feet into the dark and stood with her back to them. When she came back, the drift was gone from her face. "Mr. Mitchell, my brother lands at midnight. He's bringing a forensic accountant from his Senate subcommittee. I am asking you to come to the house tomorrow morning and walk them through what you walked me through. They have never read a real budget under pressure. You have." Tyler looked at Raymond. Raymond looked back. "Yes, ma'am. I will come." By noon the next day, they were in Eleanor's locked study. Raymond in his cleanest shirt, Caroline in jeans, Senator James Whitfield in a rolled-sleeve Oxford, and a slim woman named Patricia Hill with a laptop and 3 notebooks open across her knees. Raymond walked them through it slowly. Patricia stopped him twice and then stopped stopping him. James said nothing for 45 minutes. When Raymond finished, James looked at the ceiling and exhaled. "He's been doing this for 3 years. 3 years and 3 months, sir. Under my nose." "Yes, sir. While I sat in subcommittee hearings on elder financial abuse." Patricia, quietly, "Senator, Don't go there. Not today. James walked to the window. Caroline, 2 options. Quietly through the DA or loud. Loud how, James? The gala is Saturday. 300 guests, press, the mayor, 2 state judges. Gerald will be there in a tuxedo. We could choose the room. Caroline turned to Raymond. He framed you. The choice is yours. Raymond thought about the floodlights on the gravel. He thought about Tyler's lost interview. He thought about Miss Yvonne wiping the dust off Diane's face. He thought about every man at every encampment ever called nobody. Senator, I have spent 18 months being invisible. Let everyone see. Then we do it loud. Saturday evening, the Whitfield Foundation Gala filled the grand ballroom of the Atlanta History Center. Chandeliers the size of carriages, ice sculptures of swans dripping into silver trays, a string quartet playing Vivaldi, 300 of the most powerful people in Georgia in black tie. Gerald Hawthorne worked the room like a man who had paid for the carpet himself. Raymond stepped into the ballroom in a charcoal 3-piece suit Caroline had ordered tailored from measurements James had taken at the encampment. The suit fit like it had been waiting for him his entire life. Tyler walked beside him in a smaller version of the same cut, collar starched, hair freshly trimmed. The room turned. The whispers started near the bar and rippled outward. At 8:30, James took the stage and tapped the microphone twice. He spoke first about his mother, about love, about memory, about how dementia steals dignity twice. A woman in the 3rd row reached for her husband's hand. James said, "Tonight, I want to introduce you to a man who, without ever having met my mother, gave some of that dignity back to her." He invited Raymond onto the stage. James told the story. The trunk in the salvage yard, the 80,000, the fact that Raymond had not eaten in 3 days when he found it, the fact that Raymond had refused not 5,000, not 1,000, but every single dollar offered. The fact that Eleanor had touched his face and recognized something the doctors said she could no longer recognize. James raised his glass. True wealth is what you give back when nobody's watching. The room applauded. Hawthorne, in the 2nd row, raised his glass too. He smiled. The smile was wide and warm and exactly wrong. James lowered his glass. But there is a second reason I asked you all here tonight. A projection screen lowered behind him. The first slide appeared. Whitfield Estate Disbursement Reconciliation, 39 months. Hawthorne's smile stopped moving. James walked the room through it slide by slide. The shell companies, the routing prefix, the falsified consulting invoices. $636,000 siphoned from a woman who could no longer count to 10. Then the kicker, the 25,000 missing funds that had triggered a midnight police raid on a homeless veteran's tent, had never existed. They had been fabricated in writing by the family's attorney 4 hours before the warrant was signed. The signed memo flashed up on screen. The handwriting was unmistakable. The room had stopped breathing. And I should mention, James said quietly, the lead that broke this case open did not come from a senator. It did not come from a forensic accountant. It came from Mr. Mitchell himself, a man this room would have written off in a heartbeat. A man who read a budget the rest of us could not read. 2 GBI agents who had been standing by the back doors in catering uniforms walked forward through the parted crowd. Hawthorne stood. He attempted a smile. He attempted a lawyer's protest. They cuffed him in front of 300 people. They walked him past Raymond. He did not look up. Raymond looked at him the entire way to the door. The room did not breathe until the doors closed behind him. Then James turned back to the microphone, and his voice softened. 3 weeks ago, I would have told you the worst thing about elder financial abuse is the money. I was wrong. The worst thing is that it survives, because the world stops listening to the people in the room. Tonight, my family is going to start listening differently. He drew a folded paper from his pocket. Effective immediately, the Whitfield Foundation will be dissolved and reconstituted as the Eleanor R. Whitfield Foundation for Dignity, a $2 million endowment funded from this family's personal assets with 3 pillars: emergency housing for unhoused veterans, financial literacy and fraud protection for low-income elders, and full-ride educational scholarships for at-risk youth in Metro Atlanta. He looked at Raymond. The first program director, a paid position with full benefits, housing stipend, and a permanent office, is offered tonight to Mr. Raymond Mitchell, not as a thank you, as a hire, because he is the most qualified man in this room to lead it. The room rose to its feet. James turned to Tyler in the front row. And the first scholarship of the foundation goes to Mr. Tyler Brooks, full tuition, 4 years, the college of his choice, including living expenses. Tyler put both hands over his face. Caroline put her arm around his shoulders. Raymond, on the stage under the chandeliers, did not move. He just stood there in the suit that fit him like it had been waiting his whole life, and let the applause wash over a man who had been called nobody one too many times. 2 weeks later, Raymond sat beside Eleanor Whitfield in a sunlit room at the memory care facility. A small vase of white tulips stood on the windowsill. Caroline brought fresh ones every Tuesday. Eleanor's hair had been brushed that morning. Her hands lay folded in her lap. Raymond took the chair beside her wheelchair the way he always took it now, slowly, quietly, the way you sit beside a sleeping child you do not want to wake. He set a small wrapped package on the side table. He did not open it. He just held her hand. For a long time, she did not move. Then, for 6 clear seconds, she was there. Her eyes focused on his face. Her hand tightened around his. "Thank you, dear." "Yes, ma'am." "He's home, isn't he?" "Yes, ma'am. He's all the way home." She smiled. The light behind her eyes softened and dimmed. She drifted back toward the window. He held her hand for another 20 minutes anyway. He always did. That Sunday, Caroline made coffee at her kitchen island, the cheap diner kind Raymond actually drank, which she now kept stocked beside her espresso machine. He sat at the counter in jeans and a sweater Tyler had picked out for him. Buddy lay on the Italian tile at his feet, tail thumping slowly. "Mr. Mitchell." "Caroline, I think we're past the Mr." "Raymond, then," she poured. "You didn't just give us back the money. You gave us back the mirror. I had been hiding from how broken this family was for a long time." He took the mug she handed him. "You weren't hiding, ma'am. You were grieving. There's a difference." She blinked twice, looked down at her coffee, and didn't answer for a moment. "Thank you." "Yes, ma'am." The next afternoon, Linda Davis came to the new apartment with a bottle of cheap red wine and a 6-pack of Mountain Dew for Tyler. The apartment was modest. 2 bedrooms, a small balcony, a desk by the window where Tyler did his college application essays. Diane's photograph sat framed on the bookshelf next to Raymond's discharge papers and a letter on cream stationery from Eleanor. Linda looked around. She nodded once. "Don't get fancy on me, Foundation Director Mitchell." "No, ma'am." "You still owe me labor on that cast-iron stove you never hauled." "Yes, ma'am." She grinned. Tyler laughed from the kitchen. Buddy thumped his tail against the leg of the couch. Raymond sat down beside the woman who had fed him sandwiches for 18 months without ever once making him feel small, and he poured her a glass of wine. 1 year later, the morning sun fell across the sign outside a community center in southwest Atlanta. Eleanor R. Whitfield Foundation for Dignity. Inside, Raymond Mitchell stood at the front of a packed room in a smart blazer, leading a workshop for unhoused veterans on navigating VA benefits and rebuilding credit. Caroline poured coffee at a side table. A volunteer handed out folders. Every chair was full. Across town, Tyler Brooks walked across the stage of his high school auditorium in a borrowed cap and gown, GED in hand. Raymond sat in the front row, recording on his phone. Tears. He was not hiding anymore. Buddy was in his lap because the auditorium did not allow dogs, but everyone had pretended not to see. Early that morning, before any of it, Raymond had driven a small donated work truck past Davis Salvage Yard on his way to the foundation office. He had tapped the horn twice. Linda, in the yard with a wrench in her hand, had waved without looking up. The truck rolled on. The sun rose over Atlanta.
A homeless man without boots and 3 days without food hands back $80,000. Not 5,000, not 500, and then they try to send him to jail for it. Let us sit with you for a second. What Raymond showed that morning wasn't just honest. It held up a mirror, and an entire ballroom of powerful people couldn't look away from what they saw. Because the hardest test of integrity isn't when you have everything to lose. It's when you have nothing left and no one is watching, and the money in your hands could change your child's life by sundown. That's Raymond, hungry, invisible, holding a stranger's 60 years of love in a leather trunk. He chose to bring it to owner. Now, I want you to be honest with me. I mean honest. Nobody is watching. Nobody is coming to look. $80,000 is on your lap, and your child needs new shoes. What do? Don't tell me what you should do. Tell me what you would do, because that gap right there, that's where character actually lives. Drop your answer in the comments. I read every single one. Hit like if Raymond, Taylor, Miss Even moved here tonight. And subscribe because quiet kindness deserves a loud audience. And remember what the senator said in that ballroom, burn it into your bones. True wealth is what you give back when nobody is watching. Good night, family.